Hey guys, it's the Chad, your C10 truck nerd. Well, a while back I snagged up a small block 350 turbo 350 to go in my 1971 GMC 1500 that we call Forest. And if you're not familiar with the channel, we just kicked off a new series called the Forest Project, where we'll be going through and doing a full frame off build, but on a high school kid budget, so you know this thing's gonna be cheap. Now, that small block that I bought, all I could really afford to do was go through and give it a spray paint rebuild, so I spent about $15 on some Chevy orange paint and dressed the top end up, and it looks pretty snazzy, but one thing it lacked, was exhaust. So instead of doing the right thing, going out and buying a brand new set of polished headers, I jumped right back on the marketplace and snagged me up a 40-plus-year-old set of ram horn GM manifolds. And they look terrible, but just because these things look absolutely like junk, it doesn't mean we can't jazz them up a little bit more. So in today's video, that's what we're gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about the pros and cons of using high temp paint, the proper way, or maybe the Chad way to use this stuff, and we're gonna give these old bad boys a spray paint rebuild as well. So for years I've heard guys argue that high temp paint or engine enamels are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I've also heard a ton of guys say it was just an absolute disaster. It never dries, it's sticky, and then it flakes off pretty soon. And truly I think both guys can be right. A lot of the failure points with these type of paints are surface preparation and then the application. So in today's video, we're gonna go through and talk about those things. We're gonna talk about the pros of the paint, the cons, and I'm gonna show you the right way. I'm actually gonna read the instructions and probably need some glasses to do that, but we're gonna do it right and show you can dress up some old 40-plus-year-old manifolds and make them look like new or, newish. So generally there's two types of high temperature paint out on the market. Number one being an engine enamel and the second being a high temperature metal paint. Now engine enamels generally can withstand temps up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, where these high temperature metal paints can take it up to 2000 degrees. So we definitely need to use that high temp metal paint for these manifolds, headers, tailpipes, mufflers, whatever type of exhaust system you're spraying it on. And I think that's truly one of the big cons or the failure points people have, is they're using the wrong paint on the wrong application. Now the two companies that I generally use would be VHT Flameproof or Rust-Oleum High Heat Paint. I like both of these because you can get them off of Amazon, Walmart, O'Reilly's, AutoZone, really readily accessible out there. But in today's video, we're gonna be going with the Rust-Oleum High Heat. Number one, I've used it before and I like it. Number two, it's $8 a can cheaper than the VHT, and the Forest Project's all about budgets, so yeah. So the first and most important step of restoring your old manifolds or headers is surface preparation. And I think this is probably the biggest failure point that guys have with high temp paint, is they did not follow the instructions. They didn't clean up their headers or manifolds well enough, and this stuff never adheres to it. So you need to go through and get you some good cleaner degreasers, such as Simple Green, Mean Green, Purple Power, Super Clean. There's a million of them out on the market. Hose these headers or manifolds down, let it soak for quite a while, then come back, hit it again, and get you a stiff bristle brush or even a wire brush and really start going to town, getting the big chunks of this 40, 50-year-old grease that's been caked on there. And then we need to follow it up with power washing it. If it's wintertime, run it over to the car wash down the street. If not, just do it here in your own driveway. But we need to get absolutely as much stuff off of here as we can. Now, I already went through and washed these yesterday, so they'd be dry for today's video. But once you get them cleaned up, hit them with the compressor, let them dry for a day or two, and now you need to inspect these bad boys. These things can crack, and they crack in some weird places out there, but the last thing you want to do is put several hours of your time and money into these things, and then you get them on the engine and you've got an exhaust leak. So thoroughly inspect these, and I'll give you guys a quick look at the beginning stage of these, and they're not very good. So check these bad boys out. Really, they're not horrible. I've got them really dang clean, but they're still just kind of gross. Look at all this here. I've worked and worked and worked on that, but that grease and pitting, it's going to take some mechanical work next to get these going, but not too bad. So once the manifold or headers are completely dry, now you can go through and start really using some mechanical work on it now. If yours aren't too bad, you could probably get away with just a handheld wire brush. These bad boys they're pretty rough. So I've got my angle grinder with a twisted or braided wire wheel on it, and we're gonna just have to, you know, go to town for a while on those. They're in kind of rough shape. Now, one thing I would highly recommend, and you know, the older I get, the more safety conscious I become, get you a full face mask, ear protection, because when those little braids come off, you know, at 6,000 miles an hour and stab you in the leg or in the face, it hurts. And you know, all this blood thinner I'm on, you know, when I bleed, I bleed lots. So I'm gonna put this on, we'll get these cleaned up and show you the results or aftermath, whatever, when I'm done. Well, if you guys wonder why I tell you to put protection on, I mean, it's really important, you know. Using that wheel, I told you, you could take one right to the, you know, the giblets. That was kind of a close call, but yeah, no shorts, kids. All right, so it took me 35, 45, maybe an hour and a half to go through and, you know, hit these with that twisted wire wheel. It was slow, you know. I was surprised. There is a bunch of nooks and crannies in these manifolds that I didn't account for. And truly, if you have a opportunity to send these off to a sandblaster, you have a blast cabinet, that'd definitely be the way to go. But I'm on a budget and I don't have a blast cabinet, so this is what we got. Now I also went through and grabbed my flap disc wheel, hit the back sides of the manifold here where the mating surface will be with the engine block and the gaskets. That way we have a good seal. And I also went through and knocked off all the casting mark edges on here because they're sharp, and you know, I'll thank myself later when I'm not bleeding when we install these. But the next thing I need to do is go through and inspect these really well, make sure we don't have any heat cracks or breaks anywhere or any, you know, holes in these. And I did inspect them, and I panicked for a minute because I found some holes, but luckily they're not through, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. So the only area of concern that I found was right here on this casting seam, that hole, and there's a teeny one. Oops, sorry, right there too. But I shined a light in, poked around, and it is not through. It was just right on that cast mark. So you can either go through and throw a little weld in there. I probably won't, but other than that, these turned out pretty decent on here. Where's the other one? There it is. So yeah, not bad. So I've got these pretty much ready for paint. I did go back through and welded up those couple little holes, ground it back down. It's just cosmetic for me, but I figured, hey, if we're gonna make these look pretty, let's do it the right way. Next, we'll go through and hit it with some compressed air, blow everything in and out of it. Then you need to come back with some metal prep. We basically just want to take all the oils and grease off of here. If you don't have any metal prep, just run to Dollar Tree, get you some rubbing alcohol and a microfiber cloth, wipe it down. And then the last thing I like to do, or second to last thing, is I'll go back through with a little propane torch and just cook everything. You know, I just want to get any last residual oils off of there, and then I'll put gloves on before we move to the next step. But I'm going to bust these out real quick. And oh yeah, one last thing I did do is I grabbed my tap and die set, and I did go through and chase the studs off of these manifolds. They've just been sitting forever, so I just want to clean those up. That way when we mate the exhaust to it, it works pretty smooth. So here we go. So I've got the manifolds ready to be sprayed, and the big question is, do I need to go through and prime these manifolds since I took them down to bare metal? And you know, I've done this in the past without using a primer and had pretty good results. Again, I think it's all about your surface preparation, but Rust-Oleum does call for it, so we're gonna put one coat of this high temp primer on, let it dry for an hour, and then boom, we can come right back behind it with that high temp paint. So truly another reason why I'm using the primer this time other than doing it the right way is Harbor Freight the other day had this stuff on sale, and then there was a 30% off coupon, so I got this for just shy of $7. So, you know, the $8 I saved from using VHT by using Rust-Oleum just pretty much paid for the primer itself. So basically what we want to do is go through and be about 8 to 12 inches away, spray this primer in there. I did go through and mask off the back sides of the manifolds where they mate with the engine. That way we don't get paint on that surface. So we'll go through, put a nice coat on here and let it dry for an hour, and we'll come back with the top coat. So I let this primer dry for a couple hours. The instructions only call for one, but I got tied up doing some other stuff. But before we move to the top coat, you need to inspect these again, especially if you hung these up while you were spraying the primer on them. You just want to make sure you didn't have any runs on it. If you did, just get a little sandpaper, knock that run off, blow it off, or you could use some mineral spirits. If you do, just go back in and dust it one more time, but it's important you let it at least cure for an hour. Then we can move over to our top coat, which again, we're going to be using the High Heat by Rust-Oleum. The instructions for this basically says we'll go through and put one coat on. It dries to the touch in 30 minutes, but you can recoat it or put that second coat on after an hour. I'm going to put 2 coats on here to make sure it's nice, thick and durable, but just make sure you follow the instructions. Again, you can clean this stuff up with mineral spirits if you get any on your skin. So we're gonna go through, and I'm not hanging these. I'm just gonna dust the first coat on the back and then come in with the thicker second coat an hour later, and then we'll flop them over and do the other side. So here we go. I know, sweet specs, huh? Yeah, I'm old. So you want to make sure you go through and vigorously shake this can. You just want to make sure that the rattle ball in there has got everything freed up. This has been sitting on my shelf for about a year. So just want to make sure it lays out nicely. Again, there's a couple different companies you can use. You know, I bought my primer at Harbor Freight, and that was fine. They also make their own house version, but the problem is it's gloss, and I didn't want this engine to be super shiny, especially the exhaust manifolds. I like this because it comes in flat. You can also get it in satin if you're looking for Rust-Oleum or VHT. But again, if you're wanting that cast aluminum look, like they would have been originally from the factor, you would have to move over to VHT because they're the only company that you can buy off the shelves right now that have it in that cast color. But anyway, we're just gonna spray this about 8 to 12 inches off, put a medium, light medium coat on here. We just don't want any runs, and then we'll come back in an hour and hit it with the second coat. So I've got the second coat of paint on these manifolds, and they turned out really nice. But we do have to let these dry for a couple hours, and you can see I've pretty much lost all my daylight, so we're not going to be able to move on to the next step today, but make sure you stick with us. Tomorrow we're going to go through and I'm going to show you a couple different ways how to bake or cure these manifolds. That way a couple months down the road, the paint's not flaking off of these, or they're just sticky because they never set up. So we'll see you in the morning. So it's the next day, and these manifolds have had plenty of time to dry. And again, before you move to the final step, they need that last coat of paint to dry for at least 2 hours. Now the final step is to go through and cure, condition, or bake this exhaust system. And Rust-Oleum is very specific on how they want people to do this, and this step is overlooked so many times, and I think that's why a lot of this paint fails for people. But you can do it 2 different ways. You can install these back onto your engine, and Rust-Oleum says, hey, run the engine for 10 minutes, let it cool for 10 minutes. Run it for 20, let it cool for 20, and then let it run for 30 and cool down the final time, and you should be good to go. Now that's probably not my favorite way to do it because there's no way to regulate temperature unless you have one of those laser thermometers, but still, you can't control that. Now the second way is to go through and bake it when it's off of the vehicle, and that's what we're gonna do, and there's steps for that is to go through and bake it at 250 degrees for 30 minutes, let it cool for 30, go through and do it at 400 for 30, let it cool for 30, and then at 600 and let it cool for 30, and you're good to go. So that is the steps that we're gonna take. Problem is, after you wash some truck parts in the dishwasher one time, the wife doesn't let you in the kitchen anymore, so I'm pretty sure she's not gonna let me throw these in the oven of the house, so I had to come up with a plan B, so let's show you what that is. Alrighty folks, so this is my truck barbecue, and I scored this off of Marketplace a little over a year ago, and you've probably seen it in some videos sitting over here, and my wife absolutely hates it and definitely wanted me to get this video done so we could throw it in the trash. But I scored this for 20 bucks off of Marketplace. The main reason I bought it is I knew I needed to bake these manifolds one day, and this one had a thermometer, so this was a perfect way for me to go through and regulate the temperature or monitor the temperature of these manifolds. Downfall is this one didn't have one of those fancy trays, so if you can see here, I just went ahead and took the belt molding off of a 69 to 72 C10 and just, you know, got some metal screws and screwed it to the top rack there. So we're going to cook these manifolds one at a time and run through the three-step cycle here to get these cured, and then we'll go through and do the second one, and this should be good to go. I mean, this is definitely not what Rust-Oleum probably had in mind, but this is definitely the Chad way to improvise things. Alrighty, so believe it or not, for a $20 barbecue, the electric igniter doesn't work, and that probably is my fault. You know, this thing's blown over probably 10 times in the last year sitting here in the driveway. But anywho, we'll get it fired up, get a constant 250 degrees, throw that first manifold on the belt molding there, let it cook, and then we'll get it up to 400 and then 600 and work our way through the process. So as long as I don't blow myself up here. And I've already cleaned this barbecue out once because it had a ton of mud daubers and bird nest in there. So again, if you are going to cook and use a barbecue, make sure it's really clean, because all that junk you don't want getting stuck in the paint of your manifolds or headers. So you can do it the right way, but what fun would that be? Alrighty, so I've got it up to 250 degrees. It's hard to keep it from going a little higher, so what I've done is just came up with a hood spring. I'm just gonna go ahead and put this up, drop that right there. That way we can get a little cool air in there, and yeah, let's cook these things. Alrighty, so the first 30 minutes is expired. I'm gonna go ahead and shut the barbecue off, pull the manifold, let it sit for 30 minutes, cool down, then we'll bump it up to 400 degrees next. And so far it looks exactly the same as it did before, but it's curing. All right, so I've got it back up to 400 degrees now, so we'll throw this on there and let round two go. Is that heavy? Hot? So far, so good. These things are not light. And 400 degrees is hot. That was stupid. So, here we go. Idiot. Alrighty, so I just pulled out the first manifold after it had the 400 degree temp bake. We'll let it cool for 30 minutes, and while I'm waiting, I don't know why I didn't think of this before, I'm gonna throw this other one on here. I've got it back down to 250 now, so we'll let this baby cook while that one cools and save a little bit of time. So try not to get my greasy fingers where they shouldn't be. So all right, that'll work. Another 30 minutes. All right, so far this has worked like perfect, or at least it's worked so far. So we'll pull these off. These have been cooking at 250 for a half an hour. And we'll go through and, geez, that's hot. We're gonna get these back on there. Oh yeah, no, we're not gonna get these back on there. I gotta crank this baby up to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. And once we get it there, we'll put those on for another 30 minutes. They'll be done, and then we'll do 400, 600 there, and yippee! It's kind of cool. Oh my gosh. So believe it or not, I got sidetracked with stuff, and it's almost dark again, so it's nothing goes fast around here. So these have been cooking at 600 for a while. So that trim is starting to flex a little bit, so thought something was making a weird noise. It's gonna be hot. I think I need my welding gloves, so I'm gonna do this, put those back in 400, 600. I don't think we need you guys for that. we'll just have to come back tomorrow and finish it up with some daylight. But well, this was a great idea until it wasn't. I'll show you. So it's fine. It's still holding. It's just it's folded up quite a bit. It gets pretty toasty in there, but oh well. We just got to make it through one more manifold and we'll be done. So all right, cool. So it's the next morning, and I tell you guys, I am extremely happy with the results of these exhaust manifolds. You know, for less than 50 bucks, we're really going to transform that small block 350 out there. But pros and cons, all right? Number one, con, it took way longer than I thought it was going to. Some of that's on me, you know, if you're gonna be going through and using a barbecue to cook exhaust manifolds, buy a bigger one. That way you can get both of them on there together, because switching back and forth in between heating and cooling cycles, it swallowed 3/4 of my day, you know, pretty much. But if you're gonna be doing headers, I'd probably go out and see if you can get on Marketplace, find you a kitchen electric range. That way you can go through and put both headers, one on the top rack, one on the bottom. And it would really speed things up there too. When you're done with these, you can resell them. But if you are gonna resell stuff, please disclose that you cooked automotive parts in there. That way somebody's not getting sick. But I know a lot of people put ranges in their garage. That way they can do the DIY powder coating. And it works out pretty dang good too. So would I do this again? Absolutely. You know, I've saved probably, I mean, these run about 150 bucks plus tax and shipping, so we're just shy of 50 bucks in these. You know, 100 bucks on this budget build right here, you know, that's gonna get me, you know, cab corners and rocker panels, stuff like that, and that's the name of the game, is saving money. I did like the flat look, the way these turned out. Just in case this paint would fail still in the future, it'll blend in a lot more than if I had, you know, semi-gloss, gloss, or any of that stuff. It would be, I don't know. I think you'd notice that a lot more, but we'll zoom in here, show you guys how these things turned out, but I'm pleased. All right, boys and girls, so here they are, and I tell you, these things look outstanding, and I'm super glad we went with the flat look. I just think it looks so much cleaner, but you gotta imagine, that's basically what they started as to end like that, so huge, huge transformation. Now, if you guys don't have access to a barbecue or a range, I know a lot of guys will go through and take these propane torches and they'll try to cook them that way, but man, I tell you, that's just it's just direct flame. How far away do you put it from the paint? How long do you leave it there? I think I'd just rather throw them back on the engine and run the heat cycles. I think it'd be a little better than just using a torch, but I'm happy. Well guys, I hope this video could be beneficial for some of you guys thinking about using this high temp paint and primer for the first time. You know, I'm a big believer of it as long as you're doing it the right way. Get that surface prep the correct way, follow the instructions, and definitely get this baked or cured on. And if you do all those things, I think you're gonna have some sweet looking parts for a very long time. But let me know your opinions, you know. Do you guys use this stuff? If you do, what brands do you like? What sheens do you use? I'm always out here to learn new stuff from other people, you know. It's just kind of trial and error. But now we got to go through, get these things put back on that small block 350 for Forest, and you know, truly, I have no idea if that engine will even run. That would be kind of devastating if it doesn't, but you know, budget, budget, budget. If you guys haven't, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you come back next time, because I don't know what we're gonna be talking about. We're just kicking this Forest project off, and there's tons of somewhat educational information coming your guys' way, and I'm sure 5 of you will learn something. Well, I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching. Man, there's a skunk somewhere close by. It's bad.